In 15 minutes, I'll make you very excited about getting this position with the black pieces, as you're going to learn a brilliant practical idea to fight against a so-called fried liver attack. If you're looking to play objectively the best but boring moves with the black pieces, then this video is not for you. However, if you would like to get very energetic pieces, create initiative, and set traps everywhere, then you have came to the right place. First, let's take a look at how we are reaching this position. White starts the game with the move e4, black plays e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to c4. Here black plays knight f6, inviting knight to g5, which creates a threat of attacking f7. Black is going to play d5, that's the main move, no surprise yet, and pawn takes d5. Here, instead of playing knight a5, which is the most popular move, this is not going to surprise your opponent. By the way, this is a gambit line where black gets absolutely full compensation for the pawn. However, instead we're going to shock our opponents and play the move b5. First, I would like to give you a very enticing fact about this position. The only move for white in this position to have an objective advantage is the move bishop to f1. No other move poses any problems to the black's position. Unbelievable. I do not really believe that it's possible to play bishop f1 without knowing the theory, unless of course you're a title player yourself. Another interesting thing is the statistics after b5. If you're under 2200 level, then black is scoring more from this position than white. If you're a title player and you're a master, then according to my database, white is scoring only 1% more than black. Does that mean this is objectively the best move for black? No, but black has lots of practical chances, and they start with the challenge to white if they can find the move bishop to f1. So before we move to bishop f1 line, let us take a look at what is white going to play likely at your level. And the answer is likely bishop takes b5. Here we're comfortably gonna take the pawn back on d5, hitting the bishop, hitting the pawn. After which, the most logical move by white is taking on c6, queen takes c6, and when you can castle, you almost always castle. From here on, black is going to develop a very severe kingside attack that is going to be very hard to defend for white. Notice how this knight can be kicked away at any moment. We may or may not use in the future support the attack with our pawns. And also we could very actively place our bishop that is gonna be connected with the queen and pose direct threats against the king. We start with bishop to b7. In this position, the only move that doesn't give black a winning position is queen to f3. Now, queen f3 again is not an easy move to make because you're placing your queen directly under the bishop's attack. So wherever the black's queen is gonna move, the bishop is gonna be hitting that. So for example, if they play f3, black can continue with pawn to h6, kicking away the knight. If knight goes to e4, the line is very simple. For example, capture, capture, check. Taking h1 and capture, black is winning back the pawn with huge initiative and continuous attack. For example, now we're threatening mate in 1 with queen g2. White could try queen f3, for example, take, e4. Right now you can't take because of the checkmate after bishop to d5. Look how beautifully the bishops are taking away most of the squares from the king. So that means we're gonna take another pawn, and this endgame is objectively winning for black. If we go back, let's see, maybe our opponents are not gonna go back to the center. You don't have to memorize these lines by heart, as there are more winning moves for black. Just get an intuitive feeling how these attacks are played out. White could try also knight to h3, after which I like just to castle queenside with the black pieces and prepare the pawn break g5, g4 with the attempt to soften the long diagonal and help us to open up the file for the rook as well. For example, white could try a move like pawn to d3 and play g5, knight to c3, g4, knight to f2, and just open everything up with deadly initiative. Rook to g8, say knight g4, h5. There were a few amateur games that were lost exactly this way with the white pieces. So by any means, don't try to memorize these lines, just understand the piece placement. For example, bishop to c5, black and castle long, g5, g4, pawn breaks with eventual rook g8. These ideas will stay with your memory way easier than the concrete moves. Now, let us take a look at also what happens if white just retreats with the knight. I like castling queenside and simply preparing to move the g and h pawns forward. As an example, we could take a look at pawn to d3, and now we're just throwing the pawn g5 at them. Please take the poison pawn, for example, bishop g5, and now we get the open file to attack the opponent's king. For example, if they take on f6, we could take back. Now again, there is a pin, and therefore this knight on f3 is hanging. Knight bd2, bishop to h6. Lots of initiative moves, and I don't believe that in a practical game it is possible for white not to blunder anything at your level. For example, g3, after which queen to c6, and black maintains huge pressure. If we go way back, we could also take a look at the line queen to f3. Here black usually responds with e4, rook to e1, pinning the pawn to the king, bishop e7 unpinning, and queen h3, a very interesting move that doesn't allow black's king to castle queenside. And also, if we were to play h6, now this is not hanging because of the pin. It's a very hard move to make, but let's pretend that they know their thing. We could just play castles kingside, and now black is threatening to trap the knight as it has nowhere to go, and simply continue with normal development like bishop c5, rook fe8, rook ad8. I pick black here all day long. Just look at the threats we have, the pressure we have on the king side, and develop pieces of white. I think everyone would agree black is better here. Let us go back, and we already are pretty comfortable after they take on b5, as the game would end up in one of those positions on something very similar. The moves bishop to b3 and bishop e2 are considered not most precise, because after knight d4, that bishop is going to be attacked. So for example, if they go bishop b3, we'll play knight d4, and the idea is later to win this pawn back with knight or queen. Usually would like to take it with the queen if possible. For example, castles, say bishop c5, and black later just prepares moves like castles and bishop to g4. At some point, we're going to collect the pawn back. Black pieces are very lively. White has problems with the development. I think this is, again, very, very comfortable style of play for black. Very similar things would happen after they retreat bishop to e2. Black goes knight d4. Later, we collect the pawn back with the queen. Bishop d6, bishop e7, castle queenside or kingside, and an attack against the white's king on the king side will follow. Now, let's take a look at the scary, objectively best move for white. Bishop to g2. In a nutshell, the idea is that after the move queen to d5, knight c3 is immediately possible, and we don't have the resource to take the pawn back on g2. So, what we're going to do is we're simply going to play knight d4. After the main move c3, we're going to play knight d5 and attack the knight on g5. Here, white has two choices. They could either take the knight on d4 or execute the so-called desperado tactic by giving away their knight before they lose it for a pawn, after which they can take the knight of ours. Let us briefly take a look at what happens here, because it's, I think, very important to cover this line. King takes f7. They're winning the piece back on d4, pawn d4, and queen to f3. This looks dead loss for black. First of all, queen is checking. Second of all, there's also attack on the knight and indirectly the rook. We're not scared of that. We're playing knight to f6. Wait a minute, isn't the rook hanging? Yes, but after queen takes a8, it turns out that we're threatening rook to e8 with a kill. As you can see, if let's say opponent plays a random move like b3, after rook to e8, the only square that the king could go to is to d1. After which we have a discovered attack on the white's queen. So we play bishop g4 and white's queen is loose. Another move that they could try is of course bishop e2, but we could just simply again sacrifice bishop g4, and white is losing the queen, after which black wins the game. So as we go back, this rook e8 is a very big threat with a check on the king and winning their queen, so that they probably have to get the queen out of the way. Here black can play queen e8 and even exchange a pair of queens, rook down. White goes king d1, because after bishop to e2, black wins the piece back with d3 as there is a pin. King to d1, and here black has initiative with knight to e4. For example, king to c2, knight to f2, and if you try to get the rook out of there with ideas like rook g1, it is always possible to win this rook back by the means of pawn to d3 and simply discovering the attack on that. Complicated, but it's very easy to lose the game on the spot with white here as well. So remember, we're making the absolute best moves for white. What could happen is someone would block with check, we play d3, after which black will be objectively already better. So pretty sharp line, but objectively black is fine everywhere. We're pretty much entering a chaotic dynamic position where black has high probability of also winning the game. And this is what I promised at the very start. Lots of traps. Even the checkmates could occur with such a challenge king that barely has any squares to move on. And we could just take a look for the last time at absolute or one of the main lines. Knight, say, here. King to c2. Knight f2. Bishop b5. Bishop f5 check. And at some point, we're just simply going to collect the rook on a8, and this position is totally equal, even though we're down 1 point, but our pieces are way more alive than these, and we have plenty of compensation by the piece activity according to both practical practice and objective evaluation of the engine. Now let us take a look at the last line today. Knight takes f7 is not considered the absolute best move. The best move for white is just to take on d4 and allow black to win the pawn back, knight back by winning it on g5 square. Here there are again lots of traps how white could go wrong. For example, if you take on e5, black can already take on e5 with the check, say blocks with the queen, say check, check, knight to b4, and black is developing once again kind of deadly initiative. Not clear how to defend. If you play king to d1, you're going to be passive. If you take on b5 with a check, there is c6 when both the bishop is hanging, and we're threatening knight to c2. After a move bishop a4, we have bishop to a6 with again deadly threats of knight d3 and winning the piece, etc, etc. So black's initiative is everywhere. Of course, white can develop initiative as well, but if black is prepared and white is not prepared, we know that in this position we would always be rather the side that is more prepared. Doesn't matter which color. So the main move for them is not to collect the pawn, but rather take on b5. Bishop takes b5, king to d8, castles. And now after bishop b7, black is threatening knight f4 with the checkmate threat. This would not only open up the bishop, but there are various ways white could lose the game. For example, let's say they play the move knight to c3. Knight f4, and there is no defense, as if you play g3, which prevents the queen of taking on there is knight h3 checkmate on the board. If they go, for example, d3 and opening up the bishop to attack, once again, knight f4 and same dead checkmate, white is losing the game. So the only move they can play is the move queen to f3, after which knight f4 no longer works because they could take our bishop for free and the queen would be guarding the pawn on g2. So instead, we're going to play the move rook b8, which defends that bishop and discovers the attack on opponent's bishop. Once again, if opponent plays something like d3, black could continue with pressuring on g6, and if they take on e5, they will lose the game against knight f4 again. So lots and lots of ways white could be getting checkmated in such position. Instead, white should just take on e5, after which we're going to play knight e3, as knight f4 doesn't work due to possibility of playing queen to g3 this time, and everything seems to be guarded for now. So we play knight to e3. They cannot take here because they're getting mated. So the only move for them is queen to h3. And now we have a forcing line, take, 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 d4 and bishop e7. And this is the absolute best white could get. So if you're playing against someone that knows all of these lines by heart, which is not going to happen, this is the maximum that white could squeeze out of the position. So black is a pawn down, but black is leading the development by a little bit. I think the objective evaluation of the position is that white is better. White is not technically winning, white is just better. Practice has shown that white is scoring more from this, and I think that if you're already playing on the level where opponents know the theory, maybe you're 25 plus 100 or something online or over the board, then this is not necessarily an opening variation that you want to use in the classical tournaments of yours. But I think even at that level, in rapid or and blitz or occasions over the board, classical tournaments, this could be used as a surprise weapon. Hope you enjoyed this this video. This was very different, and I think I covered a lot of advanced concepts. So if you're a beginner, don't shy away from this video. There are lots of other videos on my channel that cover more basic openings, if that is something that you're more interested in. If I did help you with the surprise idea, please put a like on this video, subscribe to my chess channel, and you can also consider hiring me as your personal online chess coach. My contacts are on the right. I'm looking forward to making another video for you, and see you next time. Bye bye.